not probably not podcasting. Probably only podcasting in my head. I know that sounds strange. Sounds strange to me, but sometimes I think the whole podcast takes place in my head. Ah, man. The world just gets stranger and stranger by the second. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Sean. And to you also. Welcome. Welcome. I happen to be on a podcast. For those of you that were inquiring, yes, inquiring minds want to know kind of thing, right? Well, here's the story. About a year ago, I decided to podcast for a night or two, and here it is, a year and something later, and I'm still doing it. Why? Because it's a pandemic. It's a global thing. Pandemic means global. So right now, wherever you are, I can say this with great authority. You, my friend, are in the midst of a pandemic. There's no exceptions. Arizona, no, you're not exempt. Florida, excuse me, no, pandemic there too. Alaska, you got it, pandemic. Rhode Island, yep, y'all got it. Want to leave the country? Go Italy, France, Bulgaria. Doesn't matter. Pandemic. That's what pandemic means. Global in nature. Okay. So we're all in the midst of it. Let's hang out a little bit, have some fun. I put some fun music in. I always try to, give you a little something to go with. Green Day, 21 Guns. I like that song. R.E.M. Everybody Hurts. Very poignant. Listen to the lyrics. Public Enemy, Fight the Power. Here's how that happened. Okay, so I was on Match.com. And by the way, if anybody can find a way to get me off of Match.com, I will owe you my firstborn, my next firstborn. Anyways, here's the deal. I, Ken, am a single male living in Dallas, Texas, 75248. And I have been single, officially single, for approximately 5 years. Prior to the pandemic, I undertook to engage in relationships with females that I had not really had any relation with because I was in a monogamous relationship. All right. So you're wondering, why is he babbling like this? I got a point. Okay. So here's what I immediately discovered. Over 20% of all new romantic relationships begin on the internet. So if you're single and you want to be in a relationship, and we've been talking about this for days, then you're pretty much have to go with the internet. Now, prior to the pandemic, you had some other options that I would not have exercised, such as going out at night, going to a bar or something. I once looked at meetup.com. I got to tell you, maybe I did, because my memory's bad. I looked at meetup.com and they had a group said over 50s singles. Yo, where do I sign up? So I go to look at their thing. They meet once a month. I think it was once a month, always in a bar. I don't drink. Does that mean I can't go in a bar? No. Am I afraid to go in a bar? No. Do I want to be in a bar with people I don't really know? Everybody's drinking, maybe except me, and trying to be sociable. Yeah, no, that wasn't cool. So I never dealt with that. I joined some bike groups. Some of you know, I joined 2 different bike groups. Found them not only, or was they not a place to perhaps look for somebody to be with. I weren't even people I wanted to hang out with. Sorry. They just weren't. Anyways, I ran through and this all prior to the pandemic, looked at a variety of ways that you can engage with members of the opposite sex in a way that's not, fraught with peril. By that, I mean, the expectations are minimal. You're just trying to meet, and there's a certain covert agreement that we're single people, and ultimately were interested in meeting somebody, yada, 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 right? So, anyways, I didn't do much of that. I did go out on some dates and even dated um, one or two ladies that I met. In fact, I met somebody off a match back last year. I don't know, maybe November, December. Really nice woman. Her name was Cindy. I really enjoyed her company, but she was terribly allergic to cats, and I have three cats. There's one right behind me. There's another one over there, and then there's another one over there. All right, so it just wasn't working out, and I didn't have a solution. But I enjoyed her. I enjoyed her company. I thought she was a good lady. Anyways, the pandemic. The pandemic arrives, and that pretty much, you had a choice: just completely forsake um, having that kind of relationship. By that kind of relationship, I mean the kind where you are interacting with affection, not just as friends, more than as friends. So here's the pandemic. Um, I'm going to lose a year of my life sitting at home watching TV, riding a bicycle. I'm okay with that, but uh, hell, I'm sitting in front of a computer. A computer is this vehicle. I told you that the news and I have a multitude of friends who met people on the internet. And then Ricky, my little brother, he was like, I'm going to buy you a Match account. And he was serious. He was going to sign me up. He was going to pay for it. And I felt bad. So I just went ahead and did it and paid for it myself so that he wouldn't feel like he had to do anything. And anyways, here's what I want to tell you. The title to tonight's program comes from an exchange I had this morning. I so far, except for going out with Cindy back December, January, February, I haven't met anybody off of Match.com. But I invited somebody I was talking to yesterday to tune into the podcast as a way of getting to know me. Until you get to meet me, you could learn a lot about me from a podcast, right? You'd have to be kind of dense not to get something about who I am. And so they apparently they said, well, no, I'm going to be going out. I got something to do with a friend, but I'll look at another time. And this morning I had a message that said, outrage is the same as rage. I'm really looking for someone with peaceful energy. Thank you, anyways. Appreciate it. Boom. And I thought, outrage is the same as rage. I don't deny that. What I think is yesterday's show was not a show of rage. So I don't think they listened to yesterday's podcast. I think they must have listened to one maybe where I was talking about Trump or Ted Cruz or something. And as you all know, I lost it many times over the last year over political issues. So I'm guessing just hit one of the shows on YouTube because there's almost a year's worth there. And saw one and said, "Oh my God, what do I want? I don't want to be around this person." And I thought, well, this is a good topic. Outrage is the same as rage, because most of us, my friends, have been in a state of outrage for the better part of 4 years, some longer, some shorter. Is it justified? Is it not justified? Is I don't think relevant to what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is perception. So, and by the way, I responded and I said, I respect your call on that. I should tell you that other than my podcast, typically I ride a bike in solitude and I teach meditation and I watch TV. I'm not usually thought of as being, like this massive rage. I don't know anybody's crossing the street when they see me coming. I don't get phone calls from people in AA, my sponsor, other close friends going, you really got to tone it down, man. The way you're behaving in meetings, you're people are afraid of you. You got too much rage. So I thought, okay, so let's say I haven't cornered the market on that type of rage. but I may have cornered the market amongst my friends on outrage. And this insight that outrage is the same as rage, I think um, is valid. Radine says, in other words, she's not want to deal with someone who lives a real life with real emotions. And Radine, that's yet another way of looking at it. See, there is no position anybody can assume on any topic, really, that is unassailable. And that's an important thing to recognize, right? Whether it's abortion, politics, whatever it is, whatever your position is, there's another perspective on it. And one should never kind of grasp your own sensibilities as being the best position or the only right position, whatever. Because what you're saying is maybe true. Yeah, I didn't meet this person. We were having a pleasant exchange. And by the way, for those of you that haven't done this online thing, let me tell you. So, from a male perspective, you generate a number of messages on Match to people that you've looked at their profile and some photos, and you made a decision there might be some compatibility. You have no idea whether you're actually compatible. You have this notion, maybe even a fantasy, that you could be compatible. And so you send an introductory message. That's hard enough. But when you first immerse yourself in it, you really have to do it. And the women I knew who met men on the internet, Match or whatever it was, said you got to put a lot out there because the women are getting a lot of messages, unlike the guys. Women tend to get a lot of messages, and sometimes they just don't even want to read it all. So be persistent, and not persistent. Keep sending a message to one, but keep putting it out there. And I have, and over a course of a very short period of time, I put out a lot of messages because I don't know what, and I got, a very small return. It was very discouraging. So uh, I messaged somebody, and they messaged back fairly quickly, and it was cool. I thought, hey man, and we had this, flurry of exchange, maybe six, which is kind of remarkable. It gets your excitement up because a lot of times in this internet kind of venue, you send a message. So you send the message. You may get a response a day later, a week later, or in some cases, Cindy, 3 months later, right? And so then you respond. Okay, so it took a while typically before you got the first response. Now you may not hear again for days. It's kind of laborious. But in this case, it was kind of a flurry of transactions took place in one day. And that kind of gets your excitement. I was like, well, this person's probably actually there, for instance. They're not just a shill. Maybe there really is a human being on the other end of this and not just some algorithm, and on and on. So, you're thinking, it's fraught with possibility. I don't know. Of course, it stopped as quickly as it started. With outrage is the same as rage. So, uh, and I've had people tell me, friends, that sometimes they think I'm over the top. Um, Ginny has suggested, I don't think Ginny's with us. If she has, she hasn't checked in, but Ginny's kind of often suggested that I'm a little to the harsh side. I've had Elaine, who was here yesterday, said I had gotten exceedingly profane and that she found that to be a little difficult to swallow. And I get it. I'm on board with I don't need to be profane to be understood. I don't need to be vulgar to be understood, to communicate. And so I've tried, you may have noticed, since I got back from Tucson, this is day 4, that I don't think I've said the F word one time. And I'm going to keep trying to refrain from it because I do believe that I can use the English language better than to simply use profanity and vulgarity. I think I can get my message across. Now, sometimes Ted Cruz or somebody like that will just hit all the buttons at one time, and I will kind of storm the Bastille, and I won't be genteel. So, um, anyways, here we are. It's April 29th, 2021. And um, this podcast is gone back to its original title, Law and Disorder. And essentially, if you happen to be new to it, uh, you're somebody I gave the the name of the show, the YouTube channel, and you tune in. Um, isn't that right, Joan? Joan points out that I've used the F word a whole lot less since Trump left office. Yes. So so uh, it'll be interesting because um, I guess depending upon which button or which video you hit of me podcasting would give you different perceptions of who I am. That's neither good nor bad. That just is, right? And I found it interesting because I leave like breadcrumbs wherever I go. You can find me, right? I mean, it's day to day. So you can track my freaking life almost by monitoring my podcast, quite frankly. You could pretty much know what is going on in my life because one of the things I do kind of pretty consistently is I show up here and I tell you, oh yeah, so today I bicycled. And I said, let me tell you about my day. In fact, let me tell you about my day because I didn't have any outrage. This is interesting to me. I got up at 5:45 because I lead meditation at 6:30, and we just started on Tuesday, and it's a Tuesday Thursday thing. It's been on Zoom for a year, and I decided I would go back to the AA club and I would do it in person this week, and still Zoom it. So I got up, I got to the club early enough to do the 6:30 thing, but nobody was there to let me in. I don't have a key. Usually there was somebody with a key. Well, that whoever that is wasn't there. And I texted somebody and said, is there somebody going to be here? And they said, I don't know, which means no, because they were the one with the key. So I'm sitting there, and then I want to Zoom on my iPad. I'm going to hotspot. Do you know what that is? Look it up. I was going to hotspot from my phone to my iPad this meditation. It's a bigger screen, right? And it ain't working. So I'm sitting in my car. It's raining. It's 6:30 in the morning. I got one guy parked next to me that was coming to the meeting too, and I got two on Zoom on my phone. So I decided, you know what? Let's just do this. But I'm uptight. So I start the meditation, and then I'm sitting there. My eyes are closed. I'm breathing, and I realize that all this agitation's unnecessary. And this was good because I've been talking about the fact that I can pause when agitated. So I did it. I sat there and I said, okay, nobody was really assigned to open up this morning. I didn't follow through recently and say, okay, I thank you for opening up Tuesday, but who's going to open up Thursday? They said, we're going to give you a key, Ken, but they didn't give me a key yet. And so I'm sitting there going, well, maybe I should have sought the key. Maybe I shouldn't have waited for the key. What is my responsibility in all this, and what is the harm? The harm was negligible. I was there on Zoom. If anybody was tuning in, I was there, albeit it was my phone, which is this tiny screen, but I was able to conduct meditation. And at the same time, the other person who showed up was in his car. He Zoomed. So the four of us were there. We managed it. So by the time 7 o'clock and the regular AA meeting rolled around, I was in a good space. And I did the AA meeting. And then I went to breakfast with some people. And I get to the restaurant, and there's a new sign, masks are optional. I'm not crazy about that, but I already promised people I'd show up. I did show up. And I did say I may be apprehensive about coming back, not because I think I'm vulnerable for COVID, because it's been a year I haven't gotten it, but I just don't think I should change my lifestyle back so radically, so quickly. So I'm gonna continue to mask, try to maintain 6 distance, wash my hands, or use sanitizer after handling public goods. And so so the day began challenging, and I met the challenge. Um, I'm looking at myself today in view of this comment that outrage is rage, because I think that's an argument can be made. I don't necessarily think outrage equals rage necessarily, but I do think that outrage can be the same as rage. And I'm without looking at a single old video, I am 100% convinced that I had some videos where I raged because I was outraged. I mean, rage is probably the precipitator of rage. So yeah. So I'm and then what Radine said about she does not want to deal with someone who lives in real life with real emotions. That could be true. That could be false. We don't know her. She may have just been with somebody that was rageful, and she looked at some of my video and reminded her of him or her and said, "Yeah, I don't need that." And it's just, yeah, doesn't want to deal with someone who not necessarily lives real life, but lives life like that. So I think it's an important lesson for me to learn is that we can all be seen from different angles, from different perspectives. Isn't it like the parable? I think it may be a Buddhist parable. I don't know, of the six. A number of people are blindfolded and holding an elephant. One's holding the tail, one's holding the trunk, one's holding a leg. They don't know what they're holding, right? And each has a different perception of what it is that they are holding. And of course, each person is on a completely different track than the truth. The truth being that once you see it in its full form, you recognize that it's an elephant. So, it's hard for any of us to see anybody without some sort of blindfold over at some time, partly because none of us can ever completely share. That's just not the way it's done. And others because we can't always hear, or we hear, but we're hearing and seeing through our own filter. That's been very clear in Buddhism, but that you don't need to be Buddhist to recognize that we all have our own experiences. So it's like a parent punishing their child in front of somebody who thinks, oh, that's abusive. And the rest of us go, no, that wasn't abusive. That was a swat over the butt. That he had that coming. He was acting a fool, and somebody else says, you shouldn't hit kids. I believe you probably shouldn't hit kids. I believe a swat on the butt may be the best way to treat a kid at some point. It's just like I would prefer to be vegetarian because I don't want to I don't want to be part of the production of harming any animals. But I do eat hamburger. Not frequently, but I do. And a turkey. So I am not vegetarian, despite my admiration of vegetarians. I admire vegetarians. I'm not one of these people that scoffs at them and thinks that, what is your problem? I think it's a good thing from a health point of view. I think it's a good thing from just from a global point of view. So I don't have to hold on this thing, but my preference is you can always look at somebody's, but you'll never see all of them. Many alternatives to teach children how to behave well. So Elaine's already staked out her little niche, which is probably you don't need to spank the child. And, I don't think that, I don't have any reason to debate that. My children got spanked. My children seem to be okay. Of all the things I did to my children, spanking them seems to be the least of the accusations that they bring up in their adult life. Um, I was uh, I was beaten, and I don't think I want to beat children, but you know, I already raised my kids, so uh, I think many spank, etc., because they believe it's either spank or do nothing. Yeah, I don't. You think that. I've never thought that. I've thought that people use the tool that they think is going to get the result they want. If people want compliance, pain is and always has been a method of compliance. Police know that. That's why they carry what we call pain compliance devices. So you have this thing called a Kubotan. It's a stick about this long. It's not very long at all, and it's got a relatively sharp edge on one end, and when applied to certain parts of the body, will induce significant pain. And you can typically you can expect the recipient of the pain to comply, to follow your commands, to get down on the ground, to put their hands behind their back, whatever it is. Some people have tried negotiating with kids or commanding kids or doing whatever technique using tough love and weren't getting results. And so the parent in frustration spanked. And I don't think they thought it's either spanking or doing nothing. They just weren't finding that what they were doing was working. Whether they were using whatever technique poorly or ineffectively, I can't say. I just know that most of the people I know who I know have used spanking as a compliance mechanism, uh, none of them ever expressed to me, if you don't spank them, what do you expect? I know there's something about spare the rod, spoil the child. We don't need to even go over that territory. I mean, that's just, it's just silly. Some kids, I know some kids who just are good kids. I've seen them, I've been neighbors to them, just good kids. You didn't even have to yell, much less spank. They were just good kids, and they were willing to comply for whatever reason. Stacia, unlike Alex, my youngest child, Anastasia, is mostly compliant, almost exclusively compliant, because Stacia always had an attitude. She didn't like being in trouble. She just didn't like it. It was too uncomfortable for her. So when Stacia got in any kind of trouble, she tried to comport her future behavior to avoid whatever that was. An example. So my daughters wanted to sell these small suckers. I forget what they're called. Little small things, and you buy them in a store. They're not very expensive. I think they have a Tootsie Pop inside or something. Dum Dums, I think they're called. So we went to Sam's Club, and I bought them a bag of like 200 Dum Dums or whatever they're called. I don't know. And they took them to school, and much to my amazement, they could sell them for 25 cents a piece or 5 for $1. And they were making bank for about 2.5 weeks, right? I mean, we bought a second bag. I was just amazed. They were in middle school. These were sixth graders, and they were putting down the cash, right? And then suddenly an abrupt end. And I was pretty happy that my daughters were making their own money, so that if they wanted to do something, they buy these manga books, these anime books, whatever you call them, they could. These are these Japanese, they're made in Japan, and they're Japanese cartoons. They're in a book form. So I was pretty pleased, and it came to an abrupt halt. What happened? Well, one of the teachers came to them and said, "You can't do that. You stop that or else." So they told me this, and I said, "Well, so don't let them find out you're doing it. Like just." Stacey's like, "I don't want to get in trouble. Period." Another time, Alex got in a fight at that same school, and they got taken or she and her sister got taken to the principal's office, vice principal, and we had this whole showdown because somebody hit my daughter, another girl hit my daughter, Alex, and Alex, like, she's like, okay, it's on. And, my position was, well, what do you want from me, school? And they said, well, she can't do that. I said, well, one, it was after school. Okay. So, two, uh, you're not telling me she wasn't hit first. You're saying she didn't respond. So I'm not sure what you're asking me to do. And, anyways, the situation was over. We all understood. He didn't want her fighting. We got it. We got it. But Stacia was, I can't do that. Alex was like, well, that was interesting. Stacey's like, I don't want anything to do with the vice principal and discipline. And by the way, the only discipline was I was called to the school. So different kids react differently. They Some kids just don't get in trouble. You don't need to. You don't even need to think about how to discipline them. They don't need discipline. Other kids can be incorrigible, absolutely incorrigible. And maybe the normal tools that one would use in negotiating or parenting just simply aren't going to work because we know that some people are already psychotic in their early years. And don't ask me how they got there. Was it the parenting? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Listen, I watched a show called Tattooed Tears. If you ever get a chance to look at it, it'd be an old documentary now. It was on PBS. And there was this young man, he was in a juvenile prison. This Tattooed Tears is filmed in a prison documentary. And this one kid was about 17 years old. And they focused on about 5 boys. And they interviewed them, they monitored them in the course of some of this. And this one kid was, as soon as I had seen the first transaction with him, I knew he was dangerous. I knew he was a problem. Now, by the end of the hour, it's clear that he's beyond reach at that point in his life. Maybe something will happen, but he was not going to be accommodating to the staff. He had already clearly committed himself to a path of resistance at all costs, including pain. So, and then, they did the epilogue at the end, what each kid did. He was back in prison because as soon as he got out, he went retaliate against somebody who had told on him, which got him locked up in the first place, right? I wasn't surprised by that at all. So some kids, I met kids in grade school that I was afraid of, not because they were tough, but because they were pretty crazy. Sometimes it was crazy in terms of violence. Sometimes the crazy was manifested in they were the kind of kid that'll jump off a roof, onto a mattress, but you're like, yeah, I don't think that's a smart idea. So some kids just, and if I was their parent, I'd be, oh, are you out of your freaking mind jumping off a roof? So I had a boy in 4th grade and he tormented me and he was physically capable of tormenting me. One of the things he did was in the wintertime, I was dressed, of course, for winter. And his name was Don Sabija. Don, if you're out there, feel free to call me. And I had a scarf on, not uncommon in a Chicago winter. And this was something he did occasionally to people, including me. He took both ends of the scarf and he pulled until you could not breathe. And he held it like that. There's nothing you could do. He wasn't that big, but he's a powerful kid. You like that. I mean, who thinks to do that when you're in grade school kind of and he did stuff like that to people. He was a bully by the 4th grade. And I met bullies that were younger. So perception, outrage is the same as rage. Is our behavior clearly delineated? Is the behavior itself define the act that the behavior applies to? If I exhibit a behavior in response to whatever stimulation I've had, does that define the incident? Or does that simply define my mental attitude or Am I simply reacting to your mental attitude appropriately and there really was no better way to handle the situation? I don't have answers. I'm just intrigued that I like to perceive myself one way, and it never fails that that perception itself aligns only part of the time with the way other people see me. Elaine, I don't know if you're still there, and I don't know if you heard me at the beginning explain that you had chastised me about using profanity, and that since I had returned from Tucson, everybody seems to have recognized that I have been using the F word, that I've been using freaking and things like that. And that my reaction to it was I could do better. But there was a time in my life where if somebody said, you use the F word too much, I would say, well, F you. In other words, my reaction would have been merely rebellious. I wouldn't have been accommodating because see I didn't see the value in necessarily not moderating my speech. But I do see a value in that. I have said to other people, because, and I think Elaine knows this, back in AA about 13 years ago, a friend of mine in the program came up to me after a meeting and said, this woman is offended by your language in the meeting. Well, if you have been to an AA meeting, it's kind of a free for all. But anyways, my reaction was, yeah, well, screw her, right? And I think I told this tale recently. Anyways, he said, do you swear when you go to court? And I said, of course not. Do you swear on your radio show? I had a radio show. I said, no. He said, and why do you have to swear in here? And in that moment, the light bulb went off, and I thought, he's right. I communicate on the radio all the time, no profanity. I go to court. I persuade juries to release people who are charged with significant crimes without ever having to be profane. So why allow my other arenas to be fraught with that kind of language? At least if I'm going to use it sparingly. But that's hard for me. It's kind of like alcohol and drugs. I have a hard time using these things sparingly. But so it's day 4 since I got back, and I've been podcasting, and I haven't had to cuss anybody out on YouTube. I mean on Facebook, or I haven't been so outraged. That's why I think that this woman whose response about outrage. She must have been looking at one of the videos that I have posted where I was reacting to Trump or something Trumpian, because certainly I remember yelling and screaming. I was so angry at what these people were doing. And by the way, I think my outrage is appropriate. So back to what Ray Dean kind of said before, she does not want to deal with someone who lives real life with real emotions. Now I don't say that's true, but I say that, yeah, I am who I am, and I do emote, and I emote strongly. So that person may have identified that they don't need to be around somebody who emotes like that. You can find a lot of men who don't get that excited about things or anything, or are much slower to explode, or are much more reluctant to explode. I have demonstrated through the course of my life that I'm more than willing to just go off the deep end with hostility when I feel provoked. I've never been terribly uncomfortable with lashing out when I thought it was the appropriate response. Whether it was the appropriate response or not is not the issue. The thing is, if I felt it was justified, I don't have any problem with it. And to this day, I wouldn't have any problem telling Trump. Trump walked him into the same restaurant I walked into. I'm sure I would say a lot of things about him to his face, right? But and then again, I still wouldn't have to be profane, would I? So one random podcast could be misleading. And that's true, Joan, because when I got the outrage is the same as rage, and I'm thinking outrage, okay, they saw a podcast like that. They're not looking at a podcast like this because I've had a lot of podcasts that were very mindful, that were, I would say, skillful in terms of when I think of a Buddhist practice. I was, but they were all spontaneous, so they couldn't be overly skillful because I didn't know, I didn't construct it. It just kind of free form. But I think that uh, I think more than one random podcast could be misleading because until you've kind of gotten the whole picture, but at the same time, whatever they saw, if that woman saw a podcast, any one of my podcasts, it could be misleading to them, but it's not misleading because it was me. Every podcast that I've done was me. So it was a glimpse. In that regard, it couldn't be misleading. But if you extrapolate from that, that's pretty much what he is, who he is, then yeah, that would be the misleading part, right? So I just took up 42 minutes. I don't know small audience tonight, but I'm grateful for those of you that were here. Maybe Kathy knows whatever happened to Debbie. I haven't seen her. I haven't seen Mark and Ann. I haven't seen Chris and Becky tonight. There's a lot of people that I kind of gotten used to seeing. I haven't seen, so I hope they'll return someday. Because I enjoy the community. It's a small community, but it's the one that I look forward to seeing, to greeting, to saying goodbye to, whatever. So, on that note, I'm winding down. I'm taking some deep breaths. So, tomorrow I'm having an air conditioning unit installed in the attic. I have this one room in the attic that can't cool it because it's in the attic. But somebody could conceivably sleep up there if it were hospitable. So tomorrow, somebody will be here most of the day putting in a mini air conditioning unit into the place, and I'll have lunch with my friend Ginny, and I'll have an AA meeting at 7 in the morning, either in person or on Zoom, and I talked to my sister today about coming to Chicago, and we're going to negotiate whether I'm going to be able to stay with her or not. There's always a way to spend time in the time of the pandemic. So, thank you. Must do some metta because it's healthy, it's wholesome, and it is an antidote in the direction of ameliorating rage. May I be happy, healthy, free from harm. May I be free from anger and anxiety and fear. May this practice lead me to a life of greater peace and comfort, to my mother and father and all my friends and family. Be happy, be healthy, and free from all harm. Find the path that leads you to a life of comfort and peace. To those persons I harbor any ill will towards, for my own sake may you be happy and healthy and free from harm. For all our sakes, may you be enjoying your life of peace and comfort. And for all living beings throughout the universe, any being that can feel pain and fear or warmth and comfort, may you be happy, healthy, free from all harm, living your life in safety, comfort, and peace. Satu, Satu, Satu. Oh, well, thank you, Mark. I usually you inject something, so thank you. Hi, Mark and Ann. Hi, Joan, Kevin. Not hi. Bye. Um, and Elaine and Sean, if she stuck around, and Kathy and Rachel, if she's sneaking in the bushes, and Ray Dean, and I said Joan. So I think I hit the highlights. Thanks for checking in, Mark. I appreciate that. So Chris and Becky are still missing in action. Chris is in South Bend, Indiana, helping his mom. Becky's back here. I'll see them. All right. Thank you from my heart. Friends save my life. Friends save my life on a daily basis. Peace out.